Now to my next guest. She's an actress, she's a comedian, she's the much admired founder of the Comedy Women in Print Prize, and she's somebody that's just been on our screens for such a long time, always playing brilliant comedy roles since the 80s. It's Helen Lederer. She's shared stage and screen with these comedy pioneers like Ben Elton, Rick Mayall, Jennifer Saunders, Dawn French. I mean, it's hard to think of a really classic British comedy show that Helen hasn't been part of. Well, now she's written this brilliant memoir. It's called Not That I'm Bitter. And full disclosure, she's not bitter, not in the slightest. Well, maybe just a tiny bit. No, she isn't. It's an exploration of her journey into the world of comedy, how laughter can defeat your darkest moments, and coping with constant self-sabotage, even when you're hugely successful like Helen Lederer. It's a really warm, funny and honest book. And I was lucky enough to speak to Helen right before we came on air, and I began by asking her why now was the right time to release her memoir.
I really was a stand-up comedian in the 80s, and sometimes I sort of forget that. I'm so old now. I think it was very much a time of sort of, okay, I did do this thing, and then I was part of some iconic programs that people do relate to, because we all, I think, anchor ourselves and our growing up to what was the funny program that we related to. And I was talking, name dropping, to Richard Herring the other day, and we both had a laugh, because it's sort of, not that I'm bitter kind of laugh. We are middle people. We are not the elites. I sort of have kept the elites in their place, Ayesha, and the elites are there because of me, because we're the middle people doing the stuff. And so maybe I could write more honestly and more openly, because I don't have too far to fall. It's a competitive game. There were very few women doing it, and it was a very different landscape. So
and just give our like listeners a flavour of what it was like, particularly on the stand-up scene, being a woman in the 80s, because I started doing stand-up in the noughties, and it was still pretty tough. As a woman, you know, you'd often be the only woman on the bill. There'd be like a rule that you couldn't have two because you might get your period at the same time, or have a cat fight or something. What was it like in the 80s?
It's an odd thing, because it's no point being aggressive about a time that's gone. You know, there's no point being angry about something. Was your generation more angry? There's so many women, brilliant women, sort of 40-year-old young women with children doing it now. It's a different landscape. So I'm not doing poor me, but how different was it for you in the noughties?
I think it was starting to change, and there were more women coming on the comedy circuit, but you were still quite a kind of curiosity. And I always remember, and I'd like walk on stage, there'd almost be like an anxiety, you could feel like an anxiety ripple around the room,
or a sigh of doom, a sigh of, oh no, it's a woman.
Oh, you know, God.
It's sadness.
It's like sadness in their eyes, like a sort of sadness. And often it would be the woman that would look really terrified, and then, you know, you'd have a good gig, because that's why you were getting booked, you're quite good. And then afterwards, people would come up to you like you just performed a miracle, like men and women be queuing up going, oh my God, you were quite funny.
Yes. So there's still that, a sort of phenomenon aspect to it, just because of the numbers game. Yeah. And the thing about comedy, it is so individual, and it is the last bastion of freedom of expression. And so I always get not anxious, but I think if I say an instinctive thing, it's difficult to explain. I mean, you will find some people funnier than others. That's just being alive, isn't it? So it is. So it's a combination of what is normal now, so that there are less good and excellent women and men performers, but we're still allowed to like the ones we like.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to sort of broaden it out of that canvas a bit, but writing this very alarmingly honest book, Ayesha, this is not a compliment. It is alarmingly honest, because I am alarmingly honest. But essentially, I like you, I just want, why are we doing our job? I want to make people laugh when they're reading this narrative. That was my ultimate aim. And all the kind of not pretty bits, I hope, were made funny. You know, I just think you can make things funny if people, one, if you can make things funny, and two, if the reader or the audience are disposed to find you funny. And it needs that interaction, doesn't it? Because not everyone finds everyone funny.
But I think the honesty in your book is really refreshing, because you are hugely talented and you're famous, and I think you're wildly successful. But it's also nice to hear the stories of actually this bit was really hard. And I do think I messed this bit up. And this bit, it's a tough industry, isn't it?
It's a tough industry. And you see, I don't know how many people would actually, I mean, I've come on your program many, many times to hear that. But, that's not how I perceive myself to be. And particularly just remembering, why did I want to do it? Why does anyone want to do it? What was it like at the time? So there must be something about my personality that does take risks, just like you. I mean, you in politics, especially. We there's something about us that will go quite near the edge. That doesn't make us good or bad, but that's like I often think that you need.
I often sometimes think that having done politics and comedy, sometimes I think it's like a cry for help sometimes.
But there is something to be said for being a woman driving the narrative, writing your own material, cracking on, and somehow surviving, and not having to be on Graham Norton's sofa. I'm not a Graham Norton sofa person, but I'm a book pod person for Graham Norton, and that's fine. It's actually okay to be the bridesmaids without being bitter at all. I mean, there's a huge pressure to be way up there all the time.
Well, quite a lot of this, I think as well, the type of people who are attracted into actually something like comedy, I think politics is true as well. I think there's a lot of status anxiety around you as a person. And often there's a combination of great ambition, but quite a lot of low self-esteem and anxiety at the same time. It's kind of it's quite a kind of interesting combination.
It is. It's an interesting. It's annoying. You see, I like having a conversation. Like I did an amazing book event yesterday in Southern Gloucestershire, and everyone was asking questions, and I felt I was amongst friends, and I thought this is what my mother would call showing off. But there's an ability I can show off because I love. You have to love the audience, and then there has to be some kind of interaction of love. I know that sounds corny, otherwise it won't land because. When you're trying to push a gig and it doesn't go, and there are a few tricks you can try, a bit of self-awareness, and sometimes you have to go, look, this isn't going to happen. So I think having low self-esteem, being quite humble, is quite amusing because I laugh at myself. I'm very self-aware. That thing when you go into a book launch and then you say, hi, and you've got your hi, hello, and then people slightly dodge you in case you might be alarmingly honest, or like in your case, you might say something political. People are not at ease with me all the time, but you have to make that. I'm sounding very sad today, but you have to find that. But that's who I am. So I can find the comedy in those situations and survive. I think the book hopefully will make the reader connect with those similar. It's relatable. Well, I hope, because I'm not in the royal family and I don't have to uphold those high offices. So I can talk about, just being normal and doing gigs and getting things wrong and right occasionally.
Well, look, Helen, you say you've survived. I think you've done more than survive. You've thrived. I mean, I'm such a fan of yours. I think you're absolutely brilliant. And this book is absolutely brilliant as well. And I highly, highly recommend it. Particularly, I think all women will enjoy this book. And I think if you are interested in sort of particularly the world of comedy or performing, I think there's so much to learn from this. Helen, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. We'll set up a course together and go forward and teach the world, or maybe just read the book. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
That was the actress and comedian Helen Lederer, and her brilliant book, Not That I'm Bitter, is out now.